Yeah.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the next episode of the Because I Can podcast here with Tim and myself. Now, today we are lucky to be joined by a good friend of mine, actually, by Danny Chambers. Danny is another veterinary surgeon. I should always clarify the difference between vet and veterinary surgeon when we've got me and Tim and Danny, and we'll come on to military and stuff like that, where people make mistakes and, and assume that we're all military vets, etc. So for those of you in the veterinary world, I probably won't need to explain who Danny Chambers is. For those of you listening outside, Danny is a friend of mine. He's a vet. He's a small animal and equine vet, but also he's a bit of a campaigner. He has set up one of the largest social media sites in our industry, Vet Voices. There's 15,000 people on that now, talking about anything from cats to mental health issues. He's also a trustee of Vet Life. We are welcoming him back as the successful winner of his re-election to the Royal Veterinary College of Surgeons Council, which is the regulatory body. So re-elected, which is fairly impressive for someone his age, I have to say. He's a stand-up comedian, having had his own Edinburgh Fringe show, and maybe one of the reasons we'll come on to that, at the last general election, Danny actually stood in the last general election as the prospective candidate for North Cornwall. But unfortunately for him, he decided to choose to stand for the Lib Dems. And as we all remember, they perhaps didn't do quite so well at the last election. And so Danny didn't get in. So we'll certainly come on to discuss that a bit. Welcome, Danny. How are you doing?
I'm very well. Well, thank you for that introduction. And yes, I have worked in Iraq as you know, as a agricultural project manager, and all the security guys there were American ex-special forces who for the first month thought as a vet that I'd actually served in the military. And we were out on the run one morning, and that's when it dawned on everyone that I'd never served in the military, and I was a different type of vet. So yeah, it's very important to clear that up.
Use that in America. It works brilliantly because you get.
You'll never buy a beer. I mean, Paul's never bought a beer anyway, but I mean, you'll legitimately never buy a beer if you use that line.
Well, Paul's both, isn't he? He's a sort of vet. Can he be a double vet? What's he called? You're a veteran veterinary surgeon.
Yeah, vet, exactly. So Danny, your career, I mean, thinking back, it's gone all over the place, as you've just mentioned, to Iraq, and bounced around some different parts of the career. A lot of it seems to be quite in the campaigning, trying to get things better. A lot of maybe the red thread through your career has been like that. Has it been simple? Has it been a straight line? Has it always come to plan? Is that what you've always wanted to be? Have you ended up where you always wanted to be?
It's really interesting when you look back on your career and how it's sort of panned out. And you're right, it does look as though I've done quite a few different things. So I locumed for many years, and I worked in different parts of the country and in New Zealand. And I also volunteered quite regularly for sort of the public health projects abroad, like the rabies control programs in parts of India, and worked with working horses, Morocco, and disease projects in Gambia. I think the podcast is called Because I Can, and a lot of the time you have to try and make your own sort of situation, which is sometimes quite difficult, work for you in a positive way. So I wouldn't have planned to have been a long-term locum, although I don't regret it. I did quite enjoy it, and it paid relatively well, and you get to meet a lot of different people and see how different practices work, and you become a much better vet for it. And I didn't plan to sort of do all these different kind of projects, but one reason for that was that my dad actually had dementia, and he needed quite a lot of care. And so I quite regularly had to go back home to our family farm and give my mum a break, and she'd go away for a break, and I'd look after dad for a bit. And so being a locum was kind of the best way to make that work, because you quite sometimes needed to take a month or so off at fairly short notice. And that worked really well for locum lifestyle. And at the time, I found it quite frustrating that you felt like your career is being hampered, or you couldn't take a permanent job because of these other sort of pressures. And actually, in reality, it gave me a huge amount of opportunities that I would never have made happen had I not been in that situation. So if I couldn't work and I was at home for a month, that's when I got really interested in sort of the British Veterinary Association Policy Committee and RCVS issues, and starting to write letters to the Vet Times about things like vets using alternative medicine, and sort of fell into this kind of campaigning role. And one of the reasons was because I had the time, by not working in clinical practice, to think about other things, and it's things I had to be able to do from home. And it all started from there, really, this sort of side of my career. And yeah, and it's worked really well as a result. So I look back and I think I've actually had a really interesting career. I've had some really good opportunities, and had I just been focused 9 to 5 on, on working as a vet, and then if only it was only 9 to 5, if I'd been working from 8 till 8 and plus the nights on call, and probably would have by default ended up going down the partnership route and then trying to turn that into a business, I would never have had the chance to go home and write for New Scientist or be on the BBC Today programme talking about alternative medicines, and or like you talked about the Edinburgh Fringe talk I did, and it's been really rich and exciting, and I've met some fascinating people because of it.
I think one of the things that's really interesting listening to you is we had Kath Bishop on the podcast a few weeks ago now, actually, ex-Olympian, diplomat, etc. Also been to Iraq, ironically, but she talks quite a lot about the long win and how we define success. And actually, one of the things I find fascinating, because I guess I've, not unlike you, had a bit of a portfolio career, kind of done different stuff kind of as it suited me. But one of the things I find really, really interesting with kind of, and I say you guys, I mean like professional services people, whether that's vets, lawyers, accountants, whatever, is there's this very rigid definition of career, isn't there? Like you start here and you finish here. And at what point do you become successful? Your partner, you're successful. I would argue for me, you're way more successful by my definition of successful than perhaps somebody that's gone down that black and white route, become the partner, tick the box, thanks very much, and moved on. So you've obviously been quite confident to define your own version of success as to what that looks like for you. And I find that really interesting, particularly because you're in a career that traditionally pigeonholes you down a very set route.
And just to add on to that, Danny, before you answer, my mum still doesn't know what to call me now because I'm not a vet, even though of course I am, but because I'm not clinically practicing anymore, because I'm now working with Tim at Sandstone, she's like, oh, Paul, I don't know what you are anymore. I was like, I haven't changed. I'm just no longer a clinical vet. And I think for lawyers, for doctors, for vets, for people who really believe that that's part of their DNA, it's quite difficult to not do the traditional whatever everyone expects. I don't know what you think, Danny.
Oh, totally. Because of being many other vocations will be the same, but being a veterinary surgeon is part of your identity. Because a lot of people wanted to be a vet from they're 4 or 5 years old, and then when they get through vet school, they graduate as a vet, and it sort of defines them in almost every part of their life. And one of the pressures for staying in practice actually is people really worry about letting their family down, and maybe their family have made quite a lot of sacrifices to help them get through vet school, and all the driving them to sort of in practice placements when they're a teenager, and to taking them lambing, and they feel like they're letting people down. And one of my good friends took a job having been in practice for a few years with the Dogs Trust, because she loves charity work, she loves the shelter medicine, and she now gets to do that full time. And it's actually a pay rise for her, a big one from when she's in practice. And she works 9 to 5 rather than doing all the out of hours. And her mum is really upset with her because she thinks she's not a vet anymore, even though she's happier doing the work she wants to do and paid more. So I just realise how much how much of an identity it is, to other people.
It's everybody else's perception of success, isn't it? It's really interesting. It's this like massive sort of stereotype of this perception of success. We've been doing this whole thing recently with schools and going into schools, and because the kids at the minute are being described as a lost generation and not getting exam results and whatnot, and a whole load of them are thinking, well, that's it now, I'm not going to get my exam results, I'm not going to go to university, that's it, life is over. And we've been sort of laughing and saying, look, I've done some pretty wacky stuff over the years, some of which is quite cool, and some of which means I get to speak after dinner to people, and nobody has ever asked me for my A-level results. That's not to say you shouldn't do them, but the world sort of doesn't end. just because you haven't done that. And actually, on that note, I'm going to shift the topic a little bit, Danny, because one of the things I find really, really interesting with what you've done is Paul and I have done some big expeditions and we've done some bits and pieces. And the most nervous moment is telling yourself, right, we're going to go and do this, and then you suddenly sort of tell people, right, we're going to go and climb a Matterhorn or whatever we're going to go and do. And in this current sort of climate of social media and blame culture, you almost feel like you're setting yourself up for a fail. And yet, actually, I think what you've done with politics is potentially the biggest example of that, because by definition, you can't make the YouTube series and release it after you've done it. Do you know what I mean? Like you have to, because you're required to obviously to get voted in, you have to sort of publicly say, right, this is what I believe in. This is me. I'm going to pin my colours to this mast, and I'm going to do that. And you have to do all of that publicly, and then kind of properly set yourself up and be judged in open. I just think for me, that's an incredibly brave thing to do.
Well, I can identify what you're saying, because when I've been elected to the RCVS Council, Royal College of Veterinary Surgeons Council, by setting up a Facebook group with my friend. And so quite a lot of the veterinary profession kind of knew me from that. And when I was getting involved for standing for the Liberal Democrats, and I think one of my favorite quotes is that, people say, I can't remember who said it, but, it took me many years to become an overnight success. And what a lot of people don't realise is, when you're running any campaign, whether it's to stand for that, I did for the RCVS just recently, and I'm really pleased because I'll boast about it. I got more votes than anyone has ever had in the history of RCVS elections, and people have congratulated me on running a really good campaign. And actually, the 5-week campaign is very much the tip of the iceberg. It's all the groundwork you put in for many years before that. And what's really important is having a team of people supporting you that you can rely on, people who are partly mentors and people who can ask for advice and people who can sort of champion you as well, so you're not always the person promoting your own things. But when you say about putting your head above the parapet, when I first got involved in Liberal Democrats, I was getting involved, you have to win a selection for your local party. So I was standing in North Cornwall, there's 5 other candidates, and you have to sort of win the selection from all the members in North Cornwall to choose who their candidate's going to be. And I really didn't want vets to know that I was doing this, because it's something separate, and I didn't know how it was going to go. It's going to be new to me. And you discover quite quickly, because you run a social media campaign, you have to visit lots of people. We made a big sort of promotion video. It's really hard to campaign in secret. And very quickly.
It doesn't win many votes.
Very quickly.
Yeah.
Everyone asking, what the hell's going on? What are you doing? And you're suddenly putting up videos about, as for examining horses and talking about living in North Cornwall and the things that we needed to change. And of course, everyone is sort of fascinated by it. And so then you sort of have to think, well, I have to, I can't run a campaign in secret. So the other way to sort of flip it is just, well, I'll embrace it. I'm really lucky. We've got a Facebook group with over 14,000 veterinary professionals in it. I may as well take them on that journey with me. And actually, one thing that was really helpful was firstly the support people are giving, because I was surprised. I thought, well, a lot of them won't support the Liberal Democrats, but they really were interested because someone that they knew was getting involved, and that gave me a lot of more confidence. And from a practical point of view, I put a fundraiser up saying, look, I'm going to be the first vet in Parliament for over 180 years or whatever it was. Would you like to help in some way? And we raised about £10,000 of donations through that, which is a lot of money, because in total our campaign cost about 50,000. So that was a good chunk of it. And that was because you sort of engage with your profession, and you have to sort of wear your heart on your sleeve and just and so people who wouldn't normally support the Liberal Democrats knew what I stood for personally, and they were happy to support that. And that meant a lot to me. So you're right, it can, by allowing people into your kind of your campaign or your project or your mission, or if you're changing jobs or whatever, you're worried about being perceived as a public failure. But actually, the support you get from the most surprising places or surprising people sometimes is totally worth it, I think.
That's quite powerful stuff, actually, Danny. And I'm just going to expand on that a little bit, because Tim and I think both feel that sort of failure and failing is a skill that you can learn. Look at me and Tim. We've done a lot of failing.
I get a lot of lessons.
And we're getting quite good at it. We're getting really good at this failing now. But then when, especially Tim, but we at Sandstone, we spoke to quite a number of schools, and a lot of kids. This sort of COVID and A levels and GCSEs, this was the first time that things had not gone the way they planned. This was the very first time, and for a lot of people, the first time they fail is really horrible. I mean, like I say, us three, we've done a lot of failing. It's, the 210th time you fail, it's not a massive drama, but the first time you fail, it really hurts. And it was quite surprising, that feeling that came out of chatting to all the kids as they were going through the last 12 months.
They did a survey recently, Paul, didn't they? It was really funny, right? So the most random thing in the world, the most stressful thing, apparently, this was just pre-COVID, was a driving test. Yeah. Because apparently when the kids were going through their educational process, they got to 17, and the first time somebody turns around to them and goes, no, fail, walk home, was their driving test. And of course, there's a script, isn't there? There's no kind of, let's have a cuddle. Well, you did most of it okay. It's, no. And apparently because of that, it was like creating massive stress problems, because suddenly little Johnny, is getting told, you failed, mate, move on. I don't know, I just found that quite interesting. You shouldn't laugh, really. I mean, I failed mine about 3 times. I now hold the international racing license, so I won't worry about it too much.
Well, I started driving a tractor when I was about 10 years old on our farm, and Dad had me do all the tractor work for years. And so by the time I took my driving test when I was 18, I'd been driving about 8 years, and I still failed it. So.
One of the things I love recently, I live in Scotland, and one of the things I love recently is when the whole lockdown started. I think, initially there was a whole load of youngsters kind of fundamentally gaming themselves to death, or making YouTube videos, 30 of them a day, living their best life momentarily. And in fact, if you drive, I'm in Dunblane, and if you drive just out here, there's a whole load of sort of real big farms, really looked after, actually. And there was 2 kids who are clearly brothers, kind of 12 and 14, lifting hay bales and driving tractors. And clearly all of their mates were gaming and YouTubing, and their dad had gone, no fella, if you're at home, you are grafting. And they were behind the wheel of a tractor and humping hay bales. And I just thought, yeah, brilliant. Probably the best 6 months education they're going to get.
But just touching on your talk about people worrying about failing A levels and their first experience of failure, I think it probably doesn't do any harm to get a big failure in early, because it's awful at the time. But if you've got a bit of support around you, I think it can really make you, and it can benefit you massively. And so we talk a lot about resilience, and one problem we've got in the veterinary world is that a lot of people, the retention's awful, and people leave for various reasons, and they struggle very much with mental health issues and feeling of imposter syndrome, and people making complaints. And I think when I look back on my sort of career, the first time I applied for vet school, you needed 3 A's to get in anyway, and I got a B in chemistry, and I will never forget the mark I got. But you needed 194 out of 250 to get an A in chemistry, and I got 193.7. And so I had it remarked, and it came back 193.7, which is a B. And so for 0.3 of a mark out of 250, I had to decide what I'd do. And I ended up retaking my chemistry A level, having a year out and doing that. And I already had some unconditional offers to do biochemistry or zoology at Bristol. So it would have been easier just to go, well, I really don't want to do that again. I'll just go and do zoology instead, or biochemistry. And but I did do it again, and I got an A the following time around. And then when I first got into vet school,
just to be clear, Danny, I've never actually got an A in anything ever. So, I'm not. I feel your pain, but jog on.
Well, it's all kind of, cause it's about your own sort of when you have an actual requirement, isn't it? You work towards it. Because if I wasn't trying to get into vet school, there's no way I'd have cared enough. It's that the motivation's a really important kind of factor of that, isn't it? And then in my first year, I won't go into details, but I had a sort of close family member sort of attempt suicide, and ended up not taking some of the exams, and ended up taking them the first time as resets and failing them, and had to redo my first year. And now I kind of, that was awful at the time, having to redo, you feel like a real failure. Like I've only just scraped into vet school, having redone my A levels, and now I've failed my first year, and I've got to kind of, am I going to make it through? And off the back of that, I really settled into university after that, and I had a lot of spare time that year, so I kind of, I wrote the comedy, sort of annual comedy thing that everyone got involved in. I ended up becoming president of the Veterinary Society because I'd been in 2 different years and everyone knew me, as it probably wouldn't have happened if I hadn't dropped down a year. Because I spent more time, and I wanted a break before going to clinical years after spending 4 years sort of in preclinical. I ended up doing a master's in infectious disease control, which was the best year I had at university. And there's no way I'd have done that if I just got straight through my first year and carried on through, because I'd been wanted to come out and be a vet as quick as possible. And that's what led me going to Gambia and all the work in like Morocco and Iraq and India and ultimately the stuff I've done of RCVS, because a lot of the evidence-based medicine came from that. And I've worked at 2 different universities, and I've been a sort of mentor or tutee for students. And you get students who, they're phenomenally intelligent, really high achievers, and they've had maybe 5 A's at A level, they've got like grade 8 clarinet, and they will cry on you because they only got a credit in an exam and not a distinction. When in order to become a vet at the end of it, you just need a pass. It doesn't matter. And like you said, no one asks you what your A-level grades are. When you're standing in front of a horse or you're consulting or whatever, no one says, what did you get in your first year biochemistry exam? No one cares. Yeah, thank God, yeah. What, first or second time? Yeah. And so, and I think that, especially when being a vet is your identity, you have to remember that there'll be a lot of other, lawyers and doctors and that will better identify with this. You can get the diagnosis completely correct, you can get the treatment completely correct, and the owner will still complain for some reason. And if you see that as a complaint against you as a vet, as a complaint against you as a person, and you haven't got any resilience because you never failed anything, and you see that as a failure, I think I wanted to be a vet since I was 4, and people are saying I'm bad at it. I've got nowhere to go from here. Whereas when there's someone, like me, who at the time it was awful, failed A levels or had to redo them, redid first year, scraped on through, resets most years, just wanted a pass, got out, graduated. For me, that I wanted to be a vet, and I did it. Someone moaning about you, that's the least of my problems, because you go back to when I was 17 when these problems started. It's like,
one of the most interesting evenings I've ever spent. We did a bit of keynote speaking at Lamborghini in Edinburgh, and the guys at Lamborghini had invited their kind of top 30 clients in, and it would probably be wrong for me to name their names, but there's some reasonably well-known business people within the Scottish community who were attending. One of whom was on his 2nd Lamborghini of the year because he liked the colour. So financially, you're talking about people in a stratosphere, so to speak. And actually, so we did our thing, and we did the talk on team building and high performance people and all that sort of stuff. And then afterwards, we just all stood around when we were allowed to, obviously it's pre-coronavirus, and had a glass of wine and whatnot. There wasn't a single degree in the room. So here you've got Lamborghini's top 30 clients, all of whom had bought cars, at least one car, which was north of £350,000, and we can discuss that while wrong another day. But the point was, all of these people had got themselves financially into that position, not a single degree amongst them. And then what was also really interesting was when I spoke to one of them in particular, who owns a huge construction company, and he said, the 2 meetings he dreads most every year is accountant and his lawyer. And I thought, what are you talking about? Surely you love those meetings, being in your position. He said, no, they make me feel stupid. What do you mean they make me feel stupid? He said, because I don't speak their language. He said, I'm a non-graduate. I started building houses. I still build houses. I just build a lot of them. And I've got, a couple of thousand people that now build houses for me. And he said, when I sit with my accountant, when I sit with my lawyer, they use a language that I don't understand. They show me spreadsheets that I don't really get. And they talk in legal jargon that I don't really understand either. And I'm forced to go, I don't understand you. Could you repeat that? I don't know this. I don't know that. So there's this guy on his 2nd Lamborghini of the year, gets this imposter syndrome every time he has to meet his own professional services people that he's paying. And I just thought that was, there's a lesson for business development in there for any accountants and lawyers listening. But I also thought it was just fascinating, isn't it? That it's all this perception of success, isn't it?
Yeah, and most, you've touched on a really good thing there, because the majority of complaints against vets from clients normally boil down to misunderstandings and communication issues. And if you're someone who's sort of wearing your education sort of as a shield and using very difficult words, when the person paying you for your help doesn't understand what you're saying and you're making them feel stupid rather than genuinely meeting them at their point of need, you're going to get a complaint. And that's because you failed to have a genuine sort of rapport with someone and help them when they came to you for help. And I think that like those people you're talking about, they've got a client who's paying them to do their job and they're making him feel stupid, and yet he's the one paying them.
Ironically, what it is, but Paul and I have this here, we've come across it with ski instructors, with mountain guides, with business consultants, all sorts. And what it is, it's like this double imposter syndrome thing. So what happens is, baby ski instructors, as an example, when they first want to teach them to ski, they try and tell the student, if you like, everything in the first 5 minutes on the first run, because they feel as though they shouldn't be there, and they need to prove to this person that I should be an instructor because I know all this stuff. And I think it's the same when we get kind of consultants or professional people. We almost try to make it complicated, because I think, wow, I'm charging Danny, money for this today, and if I don't make it complicated, he's going to ask what he's paying for. Whereas for me, certainly, I'm the opposite way around. I'm paying you to make it easy. So I'm paying you for the outcome, and I actually don't want to see the pain in the middle, because, mountain guides are a good example. If Paul and I are absolutely capable of putting an expedition together ourselves and going and doing that, but we're trying to run a business and keep other stuff going alongside it. So the reason I'm paying the consultant is to actually make it easy, not prove to me that it's too difficult for me to do.
Yes. Stop showing off. Stop showing off.
That this is all about failure. This, and maybe we should call it Because I Can't. But I think as well, some of the most sort of
successful. Because I Can't is not a very good podcast.
Yeah, it's not very positive, is it? But you also realise, you got me thinking now, even just as we're chatting, about how if you take a risk, it's actually quite exhilarating, and it's more likely to work out. So there's no guarantees, but once again, because I was looking after my dad, I ended up doing a job, because I'd been working at Bristol Vet School. I moved back home to look after Dad for a bit, and then we created a job where I was sort of doing social media and business relations, so visiting practices for them to get them to refer to Bristol, which I could do part-time, and a lot of it I could do remotely, so it was ideal. And I enjoyed it. But when I knew that they were going to be selecting for the Liberal Democrats in North Cornwall, I quit that job and moved back home properly, so that I'd be more likely to win that selection by saying, I'm a vet, I work here, I'm here, I live here, and because I worked there for years on and off anyway, and to make all the right contacts that I needed. And if I'd been sort of a very risk adverse or really frightened of failure, it'd have been much more sensible just to think, well, I'll just stick with this job and I won't try that, or I'll try and win that selection while doing this job, even though it makes it less likely. But because you think, well, I'll go all in, it's something I really want to do, we pulled it off, and that's, and if there's something you're passionate about, you're better off going all in, because it's more likely to pay off by a long way, because your own sort of commitment to it is another level. Your need for it is another level as well, isn't it? And I think it's
Danny, there's a phrase in the military that, a bad plan executed well is much better than a great plan executed poorly. And that basically is, even if it's absolutely stupid and rubbish, everyone piles in and pushes hard and goes for it and buys into it, you've got a much better chance than a brilliant, absolutely thing where everyone's like, yeah. So motivation and inspiration and everyone getting involved is so much more important than having the perfect plan that you don't communicate to anyone and no one believes.
And you're right, and it works better because to achieve nearly any of these things, whether you're setting up a new business or, like for me, getting involved in the campaign, or even if you're just changing jobs, whatever, everything takes a team of people to help you, really, doesn't it? Whether it's family members or whether it's other people you recruit on the way. And for me, doing something like that, the fact you've moved to do it means people are more likely to help you out because they're impressed that you've put that money, whether it's your own family or whether it's your friends or people you meet. They think, oh, he's quit a decent job to do this. I'm going to help out. I believe in him because he believes in it, whereas because it demonstrates your enthusiasm and your passion, I think. And I couldn't sort of recommend enough that if you've got something that you really, really want to do, And especially if you, because not everyone is as fortunate as professionals, but I'll take a step back and you sort of think, actually, most of us, we haven't got as much to lose as we think. So from a veterinary point of view, you know, I quit the job I like, moved back home properly, but you know, I'm still a vet. There's still a shortage of vets. I'm still working as a vet as and when I wanted in Cornwall. How many people can move and know they can get work? And there's a lot of professionals in a similar situation where they can, you know, even if they have to make some compromises or go part-time or, you know, change how they do things, the safety net that you have is actually better than a lot of people, and you shouldn't sort of ignore that or, you know, lose opportunities when you're in a very sort of privileged position that we're in.
You've got to have a go, haven't you? You've got to have a go. I totally agree. That's what, you know, the whole because I can mindset actually is about be part of the solution and start thinking about how you can make this work rather than cataloging the ways that it won't.
Yeah, I mean, and all the, like, you know, so many famous quotes throughout history, whether it's like, you know, Kennedy or, you know, like Confucius or all these, or even Rocky, you know, they're all about being knocked down and getting back up again, aren't they? And how many times they're all variations on the theme, aren't they? It doesn't matter how many times you get knocked down, it's how many times you get back up. And you know, and you realize that, yeah, the more you fail, the less scared of failure you are, because you've been through it and you're still alive and things are actually all right and you've learned a huge amount. You're less likely to fail next time anyway. I've learned more from failing than from being successful.
That's lucky, Danny. So, at that point then, so thank you. All I can say is thank you, Danny. When Tim and I were having a think about who can we talk to at the next podcast around failure, your name sprang to mind straight away. So thanks for that, Danny. But it is awesome to see how your career and how everyone can get to where they want to go. But sometimes stuff happens, stuff gets in the way, it goes wrong. Doesn't mean you have to change your goal. You just have to take maybe a different route, take a bit of time off, take a new way round to get to where you want to do. And I agree. The more you fail, the more you become friendly and happy and relaxed with it. And to be fair, you did one of the biggest, and that's awful, I'm going to say one of the biggest failures, but to actually stand there in public on your own on stage on that election night, you know, I was like, wow, that's impressive to go through that in, you know, a 12-month election campaign, and then to not quite make it into Parliament must have hurt, but you know, fantastic success yesterday. I think it was that they announced the Royal College elections to get back in with that huge majority, probably is the right word. So yeah, fantastic, and thank you very much, Danny, for joining us today.
Is the veterinary college going to do your flat up?
I hope so, yeah. I can't wait to get back to my ivory tower and so brilliant.